This is the second presentation about Greek philosophy. We had an introduction last week, and I used a lot of Benedict XVI, so-called the Pope of the Logos. Anyway, today is more Plato and Aristotle. So this is almost a caricature. It's just a little detail about each one of them. Aristotle is the philosopher of nature, and Plato, the philosophy of the ideas. This Topos Uranus is a fictitious place where it's like a heaven, where he thinks that the ideas are there. Okay, so for Aristotle, yes, you have ideas of things, but the things are still on earth, like a horse. You have the idea of a horse, that's a so-called universal idea, but the horse is still there. For Plato, the horse, the idea of the horse lives in a heaven. Hyperuranium topus Uranus. Okay? And this is a caricature, but it tells, a little bit of both. One is down to earth, the other one is in heaven. So you saw in this picture how Plato is pointing to heaven, right? Here. Whereas Aristotle is pointing forward. He has a book of ethics in his hand. Okay. This is Socrates. I learned Socrates. This is Heraclitus. This is Pythagoras, and this is Euclid, writing on a tablet here with a compass. Okay, I don't pretend to talk about all of them. So this is an enlarged thing, and there are some names here. It's amazing that here you have Averroes, the Arabic philosopher with his turban, right? And here is Ptolemy with a ball of the world in the hand, and also Zoroaster with a turban also. Okay, very interesting. Okay, so don't be afraid, because I gave you a page which is about this, but this is I took out everything that Aristotle did, put only Plato. Plato, same starting point, the ideas, and you can say that he has this idea of metaphysics, being, but being for Plato is more the idea of the good. Okay? There's this mysterious person, the demiurge, which is not God, but is in between God and nature, is the one that actually organized the cosmos. Very beautiful. With all his generosity, tried to put things as best as possible. But Plato didn't believe in the physical world. I mean, of course, he saw it, but he said, this is just changing, it's really nothing. This is a matter of opinion, not doxa. Episteme is the knowledge, real knowledge with ideas, but everything that you see is just illusions. So famously, he invented this myth of the cave, remember? If you have read the dialogues of Plato, one of them is the myth. And the myth is a cave where these prisoners are chained to a wall, and then people are, with the light here, projecting figures on the front wall. And these people think that this is reality, when it's really just images. So that's the lesson, that everything that we see physically is just an image of something else. Of course, the story is longer, and one of them escapes, he goes to outside, then he gets blinded by the sun, so much sunlight. So eventually, Plato is going to say that the idea of the good is like the sun. It's like the sun of all ideas. It illuminates everything. Okay, so here I draw again the Topos Uranus. And basically, you have these operations of man: knowing, acting, basically knowing and acting. Aristotle has 5 of these verbs. But Plato is more, acting means behaving ethically, and the politics, the famous Republic, is the most famous dialogue of Plato. And ethics has to do with virtue, etc., etc. Amazingly, Plato banished the poets from the Republic. He said these people are like drunk people. They let their fantasy go and they pervert youth. Okay, it's amazing. Now, typically, Plato did believe a lot in mathematics because he he met Pythagoras in the southern part of Italy, Magna Graecia. And of course, the Pythagoreans were a sect, almost a religious sect. And they believed that everything is mathematical. It's very interesting, the theory of Pythagoras. They discovered that when you divide the string of an instrument in two, it goes an octave higher. So 2 to 1 is an octave. 3 to 2 is a fifth. 4 to 3, and so on and so forth. The fractions are the notes of this musical scale. So they say everywhere there's a length, there's music. So he believed in that music of the spheres. Even if we don't hear it, the proportion, the numerical ratios create this music of the spheres. So it was a mysticism about numbers. Eventually they said that number is everything. The stuff of everything is made of numbers. Okay. So they had a big problem when they discovered the square root of 2, because the square root of 2 you cannot measure. When you draw a triangle, isosceles triangle, the hypotenuse, if the sides are 1 and 1, the hypotenuse is square root of 2. And this number cannot be measured. It's incommensurable with the other ones. So there is something real there that we cannot put the number. That was catastrophe. So they kept it secret and called those numbers irrational. Actually, the Greek word is alogos, that you cannot pronounce them. Okay? But it's translated irrational numbers. All the uneven roots, square root of 3, square root of 2, of 5, all of those are called irrational numbers by the mathematicians. Okay. So on this side, I don't have much to say except that Plato was ignorant or didn't care about nature itself. Aristotle is going to be the opposite. You saw in the first slide how Aristotle was the philosopher of nature. Okay, all these are illusions. Yes, this entity is going to organize the world the best way possible. The demiurge is going to do the best thing he can do. It's an anticipation of Leibniz's idea of the world of pre-established harmony. The German philosopher Leibniz, mathematician and philosopher, he believed in the best world possible. God created the best world possible, which is nice, but Voltaire made fun of him. The comedy Candide is a satiric satire about the best world possible. Okay, now, a very important thing. Well, here you have knowing for Plato is actually remembering, anamnesis, because they thought, following Pythagoras, that the souls pre-existed. So when you are born, you are trapped into a body, and that's horrible. You are imprisoned. He saw the body as a prison, He was not Manichaean. He didn't despise matter, but he was just putting soul to work. So the only thing is that when we are incarnated into a body, then we forget everything that we knew. So remember that Plato was disciple of Socrates, and Socrates was the enemy of the sophists. Sophists, these charlatans, etc. So Socrates went around asking for them, do you know what they were talking about? The definition of things. And then he created that Socratic method, because he said that if we know everything, if you ask the proper question, people are going to answer correctly. It's just a matter of asking the proper questions, because they already know, it's just that they forgot. And the mother of Socrates was a midwife, so education is to bring things out, educere, Okay. So amnesis is to remember. For Plato and Socrates, to know is to remember. And in a previous existence. And also they were very rationalists, because the ethics is about good, yes, and virtue. But it's enough just to know it. They believe that when you act correctly, it's because you know what virtue is. So they didn't believe that you can know what virtue is and act wrong. Just knowing you are good. Okay? So they didn't know about the power of the will. Otherwise, they talk about ethics, virtue, and politics, especially in the Republic. It's a very famous book. And amazingly, he believed in three types of powers. People that have power in the brain are the philosophers, and they should be the kings of the republic. People that have the power in the chest should be the soldiers. They have courage, and people have the power in the abdomen. They're just the producers, the artisan, people that do physical things. So it's very well categorized. It was a very discriminatory society, and it was communistic. The children belonged to the state as soon as they were born. The state provided the education to make them worthy members of the state, and that's it. The communism of Plato is amazing. Some women were in common also. No private property. So as nice as these philosophers are, especially because of the spiritual content, they were horrible. We cannot canonize these philosophers. The first father of the church were delighted with Plato, a man that speaks about spirit and a heaven. But now, there was a big problem about that theory of ideas. Okay, so you have an idea of a horse, as I put in the first slide. Plato thought that the idea is more real than the horse. The reality is the ideas. Where are those ideas? In this topos uranos. So you have the idea of a horse. The idea of horse is there, the archetype, and all of them, and they're eternal. They don't change. Okay. But there's a problem here. And Aristotle, who was disciple of Plato for 20 years, immediately got him into task. He said, well, how can you have ideas and things? He said, duplication. You have horses and idea of horses all in reality. That's useless. But the answer that Plato gave was the idea of participation. That the ideas in heaven are participated by the objects on earth. Okay? And Aristotle said, that's just baloney, that's just nothing. A metaphor, a myth, participation. But we're going to see that the Christian theologians went back to the participation, Platonic participation. Because I can anticipate, what was the solution of the Christian about this heaven that has ideas? The mind of God. Ideas, before things exist, are in the mind of God. So it was very easy for them to adapt Platonic philosophy with the idea of participation. But Aristotle didn't believe in that. Okay. So there you are, influence of mathematics, importance of mathematics, number, arithmetic, geometry. In fact, at the end of Plato's life, he lived 80 years. He was more and more influenced by this mathematical philosophy, okay? To the point of saying everything is number. Okay. By the way, why he was communistic? Because following the mathematical idea that the whole is bigger than the part, obviously, the state is bigger than each person. And that's the justification of a communist state. Not a cruel, not a totalitarian, it's just that the state is bigger than the citizens. We'll see later, Thomas Aquinas is going to give the perfect solution. But we should have a continuation of this about Thomas Aquinas, but is the state bigger than the person or the person bigger than the state? There's no solution to that. It's a tension. But Thomas said a human being is both. He's a person and an individual. Because he has a soul, he's a person. Because he has a body, he's an individual. As person, he's above the state. As body, he's below the state. Wow. So the state can even have military service even if that person died. But we have things that transcend the political reality. We're destined to a transcendental end, heaven. So, and Thomas defined the person as totum quod est, a totality in itself. He said, I am not my soul. Amazing. I am not my soul. Anyway, I don't want to anticipate because we're talking about Plato, but you see how these things were later put in use to the Christian thinking. So again, this word is in the Mass, right, Father? Anamnesis? What part of the Mass is that? No? Before?
At the beginning of the consecration.
Okay. Okay, so now turn the page and we start filling things with Aristotle's ideas. But what I did here, you have a copy of this page in your hand. I'm not going to explain everything. I'm just going to point out to the concept because I have some more detailed explanation later. But just to have an overall, like the menu. Okay, so Aristotle, obviously, he believed in nature as a reality of nature. By the way, in your copy, that rectangle of nature, I tried to put it in green. It came very bad in the copies. It came kind of gray, so hardly you can read the word nature. But anyway, here is the everything. Here is, I don't know how to start. Okay, being, existence, for Aristotle, being was pure act. I thought that was the idea of St. Thomas. Aristotle said that God is pure act, first cause and most mover, necessary being, eternal, unchanging, supreme good, like Plato. And on the other hand, the things of nature, he divided into plant, animal, and man, as we know. But all of them are living, and they're self-moved. The typical thing of natural bodies or beings is that they move by themselves. We can say they're automobiles, to be moved from within. To have a nature is to have a drive for a purpose, self-moving. Even the inert things of physics, non-living, they do have some local motion, okay? And you know all the parts of physics, of course this is contemporary language, but Aristotle believed in physics so much he wrote 8 books of physics, okay? Physica. He also believed in mathematics, but not too much. Aristotle was very critical of mathematicians. Sometimes he says, modern mathematicians are wrong. They, instead of adapting their theories to the world, they adapt the world to their theories. It sounds like modern language. Because, 10 is the perfect number. Why? Because you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. You can make even a beautiful drawing. But there were only 9 bodies, so they have to invent a 10th body to adapt the mathematical idea. So they created the idea of an anti-Earth. Okay. Well, I read this in Arizona. Okay. Okay, we'll get there. Okay. The idea of act and potency is to explain change, and his 4 causes here, especially formal cause and material. I spoke this last week about the matter of the sacraments, the form and matter of the sacraments. Okay, and then the acts of man, knowing, reasoning, willing, acting, and making. I wish the engineers were here. Well, there are some engineers, right? Making is the least of the actions. Actually, acting is act yourself. You are acting on yourself. You are doing something. It's virtuous. That's what politics is. The purpose is happiness. Making, even art is a making, something that you make, an artifact. But useful artifacts are the technologies, medicine, chemistry, architecture, and all the engineers. Okay? It's for making. Okay. Laws are, okay, one thing I put laws here because for Plato this is all chaos. It's just illusions. There's no science possible. Aristotle said, no, in the middle of all those changes there are laws. So he was able to write 8 books of physics when there was no book of physics before. It's amazing. Okay. The first cause, secondary, proximate, instrumental condition, and the 10 categories, etc., etc. Let me just give a little idea about these things. I started with the 10 categories because I saw good places where you have examples of this. Substance is the first category. The subject, like man, like horse. Then quantity is 2 or 3 feet. Quality, white or cold. Relation, double, bigger. Place in the lake, in Europe, time, yesterday, now, whatever. Position, sitting or standing. Possession. This, I normally heard habitus. But they translate possession, like having a coat. I don't know. And action, to caught, passion, to be being caught. It's like action and reaction in Newtonian physics. Okay. This is just a brief illustration. At the end, I hope we can do philosophy. We're just talking now. You're listening to me, and you know that one thing is to listen, another thing is to think. When you do exercises, you don't listen just to the director. You have to do it yourself. So, but now you're just listening. You're not doing any thinking, I think. At the end, I'm going to make you do some thinking at the very end. Okay. The four causes enumeration, this is something I teach my students of astronomy. I put the four causes, the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And I put the questions, out of what is the material cause? Out of what something is made, the composition. What is the essence? The question, what is the essence of thing? Efficient is who produces it, right? Where from? The producer, the origin. And the final cause is the purpose. For what? Okay. So then I illustrate this. To these four causes, the medievals added the instrumental cause and the conditional cause. Aristotle also put some of these together. Eh? The final cause could be very well the formal cause, because what is the purpose of a living thing? To be himself, to progress. So the purpose is to be more form, to increase the form. So it's no problem in uniting the causes together. The instrumental cause was created by the theologians because the sacred writer is an instrument of God. Like the chisel is the instrument of the sculptor. Okay? God uses the sacred writer for his revelation. So they invented the idea of instrumental cause. Okay. That's just silly. But I give this to my student, a piece of matter, and then you put there a form, so you make a sculpture. By the way, this is Roger Bacon, a monk in England, called Doctor Mirabilis, fabulous. He was mathematician, he did experiments, blah, blah. Okay. An example, okay, this is you're gonna like this, Emilio. The example of Michelangelo's statue of David. This is very superficial because form is more than just shape. Form is not shape, it's the whole nature. It's even the style of a composer, the style of a painter. Form is everything that is typical of a structure. For example, beauty is in the form of the painting, not the matter, not the content, but the way, the form and so on and so on. There's a lot of concept about form and matter, okay? So this is a very superficial, but it's pedagogic. For students, this is a very good introduction. So the material in the statue is the marble. The shape of King David is the formal structure or a cause. The efficient is the sculpture, Michelangelo, and the purpose is beauty. Or maybe to earn money or to become famous. Because the intrinsic purpose of a work of art is beauty. You want to produce something beautiful, but it could be an extrinsic, which is become famous, or just earn money. You do art because you make a living out of it. Don't you, Emilio? Okay. Instrumental cause, the chisel, anything that is between the thing and the efficient cause, the instrument. And conditional cause, historical circumstance and general culture of the time. I learned this in Belém, in Cuba. It's amazing. How wise. I remember somebody said, if I hit you in the head, you cannot think. If I destroy your head, you cannot think. Therefore, no head, no thinking. Therefore, the thinking comes from the head, from the brain. And then the professor said, no. If you open the window of the room, the sunlight comes in. If you close it, it doesn't come. But it doesn't mean that the light comes from the window. The window is a conditional cause. The efficient cause is the sun. It's a perfect example. And most scientists confuse condition with cause. Okay? It's typical. And in Belém, I learned that in Cuba. Okay. The other composition, the three ontological and logical principles, this is very popular, I would say, hard to understand, but easy. Identity, any being is identical to itself, as it is. Some people say, well, that's a tautology. It's just like a trivial thing. No, it's not. It's not a trivial thing. Contradiction. Being is not non-being. Nothing can be and not be at the same time. Okay. S cannot be P and not P at the same time. Okay. Sometimes they clarify with respect to the same thing. You can say Peter is good, Peter is bad. well, he's good as a student, he's bad as a sportsman. So in different references, you can have yes and no. But with the same reference, you cannot have the yes and the no. So, and the third principle, the third excluded, between being and non-being, there's no middle term. You either are or not are. The famous question by Shakespeare, to be or not to be, that's the question. Okay. Then I jump to the 5 transcendental attributes of being as being qua being. This is metaphysics. The problem is that people don't even get the idea, what is point of view. For example, a physicist studies a proton, a positive particle, on means being, or an electron, a negative particle, or a neutron, a neutral particle. But the metaphysician studies the on, because you cannot have positive or negative or neutral if you don't have something. You have need it on. Okay? So the business of metaphysics to study being as being, the on part of it, which Parmenides is covered. If you have no existence, nothing. No matter how many things you can say, the first thing is to act, to be. To be is an act, it's an action. In English, you can see that, well, in Spanish also, ser. Ser is an infinitive verb. Okay? So the first thing is, so that's why Parmenides got so enthusiastic, but then he said there's only being, and then he denied motion and plurality of beings. Okay. Anyway, these beings have 5 attributes. The first is unity. Every being is one. Unum. The other one, these 2 that come now, distinction and analogy, some people don't mention it. They say Thomas Aquinas only had 3 transcendental, not 5. But anyway, let's finish. Distinction is that every being is different from every other being. In this country, we make the difference. Okay? This company makes the difference. Well, everything is different as being. As red, there are many things red. Okay? But as being, everything is different from the point of view of being. It cannot be the same as other things. So there's an essential distinction. And also at the same time, this is like a scandal, there is a similarity. Every being is analogous to every other being because they are all beings. And then, that's contradiction. Say, all beings are different. And now I say that all beings are analogous. No, they're not equal, they're analogous. I explained this last week. The difference between analogy and equality. Anyway, true. Every being is true. Verum. Every being is bonum, is good. As being. For example, a false coin, copper coin, is bad. But it's true. As copper is what it is. As being, you can never be nothing but what you are. So intrinsically, everything that is being is true. And also good. There's nothing bad by existing. It could be the use or whatever, but by existence, everything is good. This is very fabulous because this is what we think that when God created the world, everything was good. But philosophers have this idea also. No, I have it here. Well, brief discussion. I put it at the end.
Some people put it beautiful.
Okay. I got this from the book of Steenbergen from Louvain. He has the 5 transcendentals. In fact, he says that there are 6 transcendentals. You remember, Eric, what did Father Valli taught you about the transcendentals? Because I asked Jose Lopez, and he said, well, it's different of opinions. Yeah, they say that beauty is true, good, and beautiful. But anyway, now, this is the crux of metaphysics, the complicated part. Because the attributes of being is almost like honeymoon. Okay, beautiful things, good things, real things, unified things. I call that the honeymoon of philosophy. You can recreate yourself looking at very different examples of unities in a country, in a marriage, unity, and etc. Now the problem starts with the compositions, which is 4 of them. Essence and existence, I'm going to just quickly. Substance and accidents, act and potency, and matter and form. The last one we already saw. But why are these concepts created? Well, as in non-existent because of the plurality problem. Believe it or not, the first question is there one being or many beings? Father Norris Clark, a Jesuit philosopher, he has a book called The One and the Many. As simple as that.
That is God.
Hmm?
God is one and many, because it's three persons.
I know, but in reality, Parmenides thought there was only one being because everything is being is the same. Only one being, monism is called. Anyway, to solve that problem then comes the concept of existence and essence. All beings exist, so they have existence, but they're different, so they have essences. The modes of beings are different. Okay? So Parmenides said, or we said before, between being and non-being, there's no middle term. No, between being and non-being, you can be other thing. So between A and no A, that's right, there's no alternative. But between A, you can have B. There's a plurality. So B is the negation of A, and A is the negation of B. So that middle term excluded is not violated, but it can be modified with the existence of many beings. Okay. Substance and accidents, substance what stays beneath what exists in itself, the accident exists in the substance. And they change, the accident come and go. So we saw how the doctrine of transubstantiation needs these concepts, okay? Act and potency, Aristotle created this to explain change. This was a genius, but nobody understands this definition of motion. If I read it to you, motion is the actuality of the potential insofar as it is potential, okay? Some people laugh at this definition. It's a very metaphysical thing, okay? When something is moving, it's in act, but it's a potency to be somewhere else. It has the potency to move. But it's also acting. So the potency is acting insofar as it is potential. When it reaches the term, it's no more potency. Potency is finished. Physicists like to see here kinetic energy and potential energy, but potential energy is not exactly potency. And the last one, matter and form, are the intrinsic causes of mixed beings that have matter and form, like body and soul. In the case of man, the matter is the body, the form is the soul. But for Aristotle, matter and form is not only soul and body, it's also life. All living organisms, plants, animals, and men have matter and soul. In fact, he called vegetative souls, animal souls, and rational souls. So anything that conforms, gives life to something that it can move by itself is called a form or a soul. One problem that appeared between Bonaventure and Thomas Aquinas is that Bonaventure thought that the three souls, rational, animal, and sensitive, were different. Thomas said, no, there's only one individual with the three functions. Okay? It's typical discrepancy between Bonaventure and Thomas Aquinas. And matter and form, intrinsic causes of mixed beings that are mixed. Matter and they're spiritual on one side and material on the other. Prime matter, I put here apart because matter has different divisions like secondary matter, primary matter, but the real prime matter, remember that philosopher, Anaximander, he created the idea of apeiron. Apeiron, instead of the four elements, fire, water, earth, and gas, he said no. The origin has to be something indeterminate. He called it apeiron. That's the prime matter of Aristotle. Prime matter is totally indeterminate. It can be anything. So I put here, it can be the source of power. And let me go back momentarily. The source of power, because being passive, it can adapt itself to anything. Technicians use matter to extract the powers inside there. Isn't that amazing that as science advances, we get more and more power from it? Think of the animals. in the old times, animals were the force. Then came vapor. Then came electricity. And then came the atom. So everything is more little. We're going into nothing. We're going into the prime matter of things. There's a whole philosophy about prime matter being the source of power. The source of power, Vincent Edward Smith, a philosopher from Catholic University, he has this beautiful book, written in the 1950s. He said, if men do not live by love, they will die by power. Because power is indifferent and it inspires fear. Indifferent, yes. You don't know what the bad guy is going to do. Power is always scary. It can go this way or that way. It has no determination. And that creates, says Vincent, an indifferent man. Indifferent man. He said this in 1950, much before Pope Francis speaking about the globalizations of indifference. So power makes you indifferent. You want just to exploit things. This is the problem of the Amazon synod now. And in general, the exploitation of the earth without limits. Anyway, that's just a little view, zoom in how this concept have a lot of tremendous implications for our life. Okay, the next is the same doctrine of the four composition. I found this in Norris Clarke's book. This, for me, this is fabulous because he put everything together. I have read about matter and form, about action, but they said, well, this is kind of a puzzle. But Father Norris Clarke, it's not his idea, it's St. Thomas Aquinas again. So the same four metaphysical compositions are correlated by Father Norris Clarke's S.J. under act and potency. Here he follows Thomas' synthesis of Plato's participation metaphysics and Aristotle's act potency. So he's putting together, St. Thomas Aquinas is putting the participation philosophy of Plato, which is very important. Priests participate in the priesthood of Christ. Okay, so it's not that empty word that Aristotle thought. And at the same time, combine it with act and potency. So this is in his book, and I copied. A complete real being has, yes, accidents and substance, existence and essence, form and matter, and all is subsumed into act and potency. So the upper word in each case is act, the lower one is potence. Okay. Here, form is an act, it's a definite thing that gives life to things, the soul of things. Matter is indifferent, is passive, potential. But the same thing happens with existence and essence. Existence is an act, whereas essence is something that can be different. It can be potential in many different ways. It's a modality of existence. Thomas Aquinas in this, I love when it says, existence, everybody is equal or everything is analogous because we all exist. We are all beings. The worm, the man, the angel. Between being and non-being, there's a middle term. But there's a difference also because each one has its own essence. So there's this scale of being. But existence is more important than essence. Because since it's common to everybody, we participate in the banquet of existence. Everything, we're like everything else. Our perfection is in the existence. Our essence limits us to our just particular mode of being. So essence is the principle of limitation, whereas existence is the principle of perfection. This is so important. Why in Spain, every city thinks that he's the whole Spain? Because they are essentialists. You know how the Spanish are like that. No hay nada como Madrid. España, Madrid es España, because they are so regionalistic, they are essential, they forget the big picture of existence, which are common to all the universe. The same thing happened with Christian and human. We are Christian, our perfection is in Christianity, our essential is humanity. You cannot be Christian without being human, but you can. So Christianity perfects human. Anyway, there's a lot of consideration here, which I don't want to delay much, but we have time. But I found this fabulous from Father Norris Clark. The next one, it goes back to, no, this is Aristotle, but Aristotle 101, okay? Without creating all the things that came later. Some of them are Aristotelian. Emilio, I have to discuss that because I read it and I was surprised. In the book of Father Teodoro La Torre, Acto Puro. Okay, anyway. So here is again a repetition of the same thing. The word nature in your copies was bad. Just to make color copy cost me 59 cents per copy. Without, it was 12 cents. So when a man says it's $18, what? No, don't make copy. So I gave you no color copies. Okay, you don't need the color there. You don't need the red, except I put in red the things that are more typical, important, self-moving. Things are those that move except themselves. Automobiles, self-mobiles. And laws, yeah. In the middle of all these changes that Plato despised as something illusion, Aristotle saw laws. They don't change, but some pattern that repeats. The same thing as Plato, episteme, ideas, abstract universals. Okay, here are the 5 verbs. Knowing, reasoning, willing, acting, and making. Willing is, of course, the source of our freedom. Deciding, loving, fruition. I put in the order. Scholastics say that to decide is the lowest act of willing, of the will. Then decide, and fruition is the last one. Fruition is when you enjoy what you have already got with your effort. Okay? It's a perfect act of the will. This is philosophical psychology. It's not Freudian psychology, or it's not the psychology of the rat. It's the psychology of the human being, the human person that has matter and form. Then, in the department of knowing, like Plato, you have ideas, abstract ideas, universe. This is the word abstract scares some people. And so, no, that's an abstraction. Wait a moment. All our ideas are abstract. That's all we have. Even in the physical world, a horse, the idea is abstract. Mathematics, the triangle is abstract. Metaphysics, unity is abstract. Everything that we think is an abstract idea. It's not a bump in our head. It's not an agglomeration of atoms or anything like that. That's it. Otherwise, we cannot think. Now, the process of abstraction is hard to explain, and Aristotle used the active intellect to explain it. There's a passive intellect that receives things through their senses passively, but there's an active intellect that is to take the essential thing from the senses and creates the abstract idea. It's a process of separation, abstraction. Okay. And that can be done because we are spirits. You can demonstrate the spirituality of the soul by analyzing your thoughts. Square root of 2. Where is that? Where's the matter of the square root of 2? So you mathematicians, you better believe in the soul, because you are all the time playing with idealizations, things that don't have matter, that don't have weight, not even motion. Mathematical entities don't move. Motion is physical things. So Aristotle said that if we don't understand motion, we don't understand nature. He sounds like a very advanced person, almost like a modern scientist. He observes things and gets things by induction. You see, this arrow means from the particular to the general. This means from the general to the particular. So doing experiments, observing the world, you get the laws of physics. In mathematics, you don't do that. You have principles, axioms, and then you deduce all the theorems. Okay. And of course, you have geometry and application arithmetic and astronomy. Astronomy for the ancient was a mixed science. It has physics and mathematics. Ciencia media, they call it. Okay, so the most peculiar thing of Aristotle was the invention of logic, prior analytics, with the three principles of logic I mentioned before: identity, non-contradiction, and third, excluded. Now, we can be here in an entire week studying the politics, the sociology. Let me see if I have something more of that. Okay. I put the 10 categories here. I already explained to you the 10 categories, the causes, because I want to have a little discussion at the end. Here I have the famous mover Aristotle, because here all these concepts go to the essence of God. In fact, Aristotle called metaphysics theology. It's the only human science that can mention the name of God. What is the name of God in the Bible? I am. It's being.
But it's also law.
Of course, all the transcendentals. I put the transcendental here but this is not Aristotle. I don't know how many of them, but this is already the following philosopher. Okay, change, and it's very interesting, the idea of Aristotle about happiness. That's the final cause of our life is to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. Now, they differ what makes you happy. And he discusses first pleasure, then winning a battle, then giving, and finally virtue. Pleasure is good. Aristotle was not against saying pleasures, but if you repeat it, it can be bad. It gives you pain. It's a partial thing. Winning, he says, okay, you are happy when you win, but then at the expense of the other, which is is defeated. So it's not a good thing. Giving, this is surprising. You are happy when you give. I read it many years ago. Aristotle asked himself, can a man that is self-sufficient be happy? And he answered, no. He needs a poor man to do good to him. Wow. You need poor people to be happy. That's Francisco. We need the people in the peripheries. To be happy is not, well, okay, yes, to do good work and all that. But have you ever thought that you are happy when you give? That's the gospel. It's more blessed the one that gives than the one that receives. It's amazing. Obviously, the Greeks, I think providentially, they were prepared by God so that the gospel could travel along the reason of man. Okay. And the last one is happiness as virtue. Virtue, Aristotle said, happiness cannot be a state, it's an action. And when you are virtuous, you do action, you do something. Amazingly, he also said he cannot define virtue. What is virtue? What the virtuous man does. An example, because it's a practical thing, prudence. You want to know what a virtue? Observe virtuous men. It's like saying, look at the saints, look at the great soul people. That's virtue. So then he goes to the politics, whose purpose is only to promote the virtuous life among citizens. That's the purpose of the president, of the king, to promote the bonum honestum among the people. It's not economic, it's not army, it's not anything, it's just virtuous life. When was the last time, people, that you heard this from any politician? We have to promote virtue in our cities. Otherwise, they're going to be drug addicts and everything's going to go down the drain. Aristotle said this. That's why education was for the Greeks very important. In the case of Plato, he said it has to be in the hands of the state. But anyway, so then the arts, he has a book about tragedy and all that. And here's where I encountered the definition of beauty given by St. Thomas. Personally, I discovered St. Thomas through Maritain in a book about philosophy of art in UM many years ago. I said, who is this? Maritain said, Thomas was as wise as he was simple. He defined beauty, id quod visum placet. When you read that book, it's absurd because there's all kinds of theories about art as power, Santayana and Schopenhauer. It's all a hodgepodge. When I read this chapter written by Maritain on beauty, art and scholasticism, and quoting Thomas at the beginning, what is this? Therefore, beauty is a formal cause. It appeals to the intelligence. Since it's intelligent, it has to have the splendor, vary, harmony, and unity, or unity and harmony. Harmony is the unity in variety. The three things, splendor, vary, unity, and harmony. Because that appeals to the mind. You see, it's an intellectual beauty. It's a vision. It moves our heart after our minds have contemplated it. So Thomas, as you know very well, is more rationalistic than the Augustinians, than the Franciscans. For Bonaventure, heaven is love, and it's true. But for Thomas, it's the beatific vision. You remember the ending of the Mass that Father Christian read? When Christ appears, we'll be like him because we will see him. By seeing Christ, we'll become him. Wow. Okay, so anyway, we can be talking about all this the whole week or more, a whole life. Being is. You know what Vincent Edward Smith says? Being is. You need a whole life to unravel the wisdom that Parmenides put there. It's not tautology, okay? It's a fact. It's not only being is being or a nice identity. No, it's a fact. Reality exists primordially. Have you ever noticed that? Of course. People say, but that's just a commonplace. We know that things exist. Why? Whether there's something and not nothing. You take it for granted. We take it for granted. Philosophers don't take anything for granted. Okay, so there are some beautiful phrases in Latin. Monsignor and Christian, Father Christian, you're going to help me pronounce this. It's a random collection. Ex nihilo nihil fit, right? Nihilo. From nothing, nothing comes. De la nada, nada sale. So we need something to produce something. And, you know, I look in the Wikipedia, and they put an example. You remember The Sound of Music? Nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever did. So somewhere in my youth or childhood, I must have done something good. When they are discovering each other, I sing this in front of my students in FIU. They applaud. Okay. Nihil est in intellecto quod non prius fuerit sensu. This is Aristotle against Plato. Plato believes his innate ideas from previous existences. Aristotle said, no, we are born like a tabula rasa. And this is the sacramental theology of the church. Everything comes to matter and form. We are Aristotelian without knowing it. And it's important not to downgrade matter. Okay, the other one. Enset verum convertuntur, enset bonum convertuntur. Between being and truth is the same thing. I'm going to have the definition of truth by St. Augustine. What is truth? Id quod est. What exists. What doesn't exist is not true. And bonum is convertible. Something, and the good and the existence are convertible. It's not an equality, it's just analogy. Because remember that the attributes of being is not properties of being. An attribute is the whole thing. A property is part of it. A ball is red, or an apple is round, or whatever. It's part of it. But unity is the whole thing. Being is the whole thing. The truth is the whole thing. So attribute is when it refers to the totality of an entity. We speak about God attributes, not God properties. Quid movetur ab ali movetur. Sometimes they write the quid together, Father, right? In one word. Now, everything that moves is moved by another. I'm going to present a problem for you. Because Aristotle said that living things move by themselves. How can you put the two things together? I had this in my mind many years ago. Everything that moved by another. And that's what gives Aristotle the argument of the mover, which Thomas Aquinas is going to take as his prima via. Because you cannot keep going finding movers. You have to start at some point, or you never do it. So everything that moves is moved by another gives you the reasoning about a unmoved mover. Now, living beings are moving per se. They have life. They're really automobiles. So how can you put the two things together, you know? I read it in the book of Agrupacion, History of Philosophy. I found the problem there beautifully stated. There are different things of motions, different kinds. So I'm glad that somebody resolved it for me. You know Agrupacion, right? The Jesuits are supposed to read the definitive history of philosophy in many volumes. Okay, definition I said before, St. Augustine said, equal that which is, very simple. But Thomas is more sophisticated. Veritas is adequatio rei et intellectus. The agreement between the mind and the thing. So you see the difference. Augustine is subjective. It's amazing because Augustine is usually more subjective, but he says now, truth is that which is. But Thomas relates truth to the mind that is knowing. It's an agreement, an adequatio between the mind and the thing. Okay? So it's a relationship between the thing and the mind that knows the thing. I love this one. Nam error circa creaturas redundat in falsam de Deo scientia. In the Summa contra Gentiles. I discovered this recently, and this is my vocation in physics. If you don't know well the creature, you are offending God. Like a pianist that plays a Beethoven sonata with wrong notes, he's offending Beethoven. So any error about creatures redounds as a bad knowledge of God. Now, I've talked with Sixto, my brother theologian, my brother-in-law. I said, no, he's not talking about natural creatures. He's talking about creation, just creation. In fact, in the whole paragraph, Thomas sounds like a human. Yeah, he says, those are totally patent error, completely equivocados, who said that with respect to God, we only have to acknowledge that he's a creator. No, we have to also acknowledge that to know the creatures correctly. Otherwise, we are having a false idea of God. Falsam de Deo scientia. And I can revert that. I can say the opposite. If we have a wrong idea of God, we're going to have a wrong idea of creatures, which happens every time you have an atheistic system. Man is destroyed. Wrong idea of God conveys wrong idea of man, his creature. This, I put omnia rerum, todas las cosas. I don't know if that's correct. Sunt simpliciter diversa secundum quid uno. Now, Emilio, this is what you were saying. This is the language that Father Felix Varela said, oh, this barbaric language. How come simplicity means absolute and secundum quid relative? Where did that come from? Well, so things are simple. When you consider things alone, by themselves, they're different, completely different. Each one is an absolute, because to be you don't need to be compared with. Everything has an absolute value. But you consider them relatively, secundum quid, they are one, because they are relationships. We have the common origin and the common destiny. Isn't that beautiful? That's the whole story of metaphysics. To find the diversity of things and then unify them relatively by their relationship. Una sola es el jefe maestro.